Hello everybody. In this video, I want to quickly talk about variables. If you create an experiment, let's say my test experiment, uh, you know how to make a task. So you just start something like task, my task. Now, a little bit boring name. Um, now, what we are going to do in this task is simply make a short, simple task in which we use a variable. So let's say we say now let's say SGF there's another tutorial about keys. So we're going to just say for example use the B key. So we say keys B. We just need that for later when we use the keyboard, and you need to say which keys to use. But that's not relevant for the variables. Now first what I want to show you, so we show a rectangle, and we show that the center of the screen, that's position 0, 0, and we make it say 150 pixels wide and 100 pixels high. And then you can also say something like we make it a green rectangle. And that's all we do for now. And then we say read key, and we just read one key. And I recommend you to watch the read key short tutorial, read key, and we just make that quite long. Say, uh, if sometimes I have read keys that I want to last really long, just for, especially for testing, I do something like that. 99999. That's easy to type. And after that, I immediately remove it from the screen. So that's for now my task, and there are no variables in it yet. And I do quickly a block test task, my task, say um, let's say just 10 trials for this. So what you first do is you save this, and you start with something simple, and you run it, and then you just have your rectangle, and that's all it does. And if I press the B, it immediately does the next trial. So that's not so interesting, but that's the basis. Now I want to show you how you can position the rectangle based on a random value. Now, you need to understand the positioning system a little bit, and for that, we quickly click here. Uh, by the way, it says here the line numbering mode works again really well. Uh, at this time, it's July 2025. With the new version, we had a small bug in the code, but I recommend you actually to use that, and let's do that. Uh, we switch on the script error with line numbers, then you can also get color coding. So let's go back to that. Let's go back to my experiment. So now it looks like this. Now I'm going to um, go to the command overview to show you quickly the coordinate system. You should probably know that from other tutorials, but 0, 0 is the center, and depending on your resolution, typically you can go back from minus 400 to 400 if you have an 800 pixel wide resolution, which is the default. Now I'm going to move the X position of the rectangle, which is this one, to the value of a variable, and I say called my X value. Now you see, if you use syntax highlighting, that's quite nice. It is in a different color. And I start with an ampersand. Now what does that mean? This is important. The ampersand PsyToolkit, or equally a dollar sign, you can use either. But there is a small detail between the two. I will explain it in a second, but uh, one of these two that indicates a numerical variable. The only difference between the ampersand and the dollar sign variables is that the dollar sign variables, if you haven't given it a value yet, it will always be 0. Every time the PsyToolkit runs through the task, it will be reset to 0. So that's quite nice. But sometimes you want that variables hold their value throughout just the trials and throughout the experiment, and then the ampersand is what we call a global variable. So maybe use this, and then you basically can never go wrong. But before we use it, we're going to set it. And this is how you do it in PsyToolkit. You always use the set instruction. You say set, say my X value, and then you can set it to a value. You can just set it actually to say value 100. In other programming languages, you would probably say my x value equals 100. In PsyToolkit, it doesn't work like that. So you say set, then you say my x value, and then you give a value. So this would be a constant value, which is possible. If we compile that and run that, it looks like this. Compile and run, and then you see it's always slightly off center, and that's because we have set it to 100. Okay, but now that is not so interesting. But let's set it to a random number. How do you do that? Well, you can go to the instruction set. There is a good overview. Set local or global variables, and it gives you all sorts of examples. So you can set, for example, set x to a random value, and then from 1 to 10. And there are lots of other things you can do it. And in this overview, you can see what sort of things you can do. But let's say what we did are random. Yeah, and let's set it to a value between, say, minus 300 to 300. Then that is a value can be minus 300, can be minus 200, can be 0, can be 10, can be 300. Every time when it runs this, it will select a different value. And if we do that, save code, we compile, we run the experiment, and if I press B, it will select a different value, right? So, and that's I'm just zooming out a bit. So let's rerun that. Um, so you get these different values. I did only 10 trials, so okay. Now, um, sometimes for the screencast here, I zoom in a little bit, and then uh, it, I normally don't work like in that zoom level, but that's nice for showing the video. Um, Now let's actually also set the y value of your. You can do it. My y value, and that is then also a variable. And you can before that you can say my x value, my y value, and if you do this, basically my x value will set to a value from minus 300 to 300, and then my y value, but it would be a different value because it's randomly chosen. And if you would run it like this, you would set both these things, compile, okay, and run. And then zoom out a little bit, run, click to start, and then if we do this, you can see they get at all the different positions. Now you can do really funny things with these variables, but you can do a lot more. Um, but you know the idea of a sometimes it's just handy to, especially for setting random values. I would say that is a main feature. There are many other situations where you could use it. Sometimes you want to calculate something. Say, for example, you have a random value and you want, uh, let's say, for the x value, you set a random value. Now let's transform that value. So you can say expression. That's expression. That's basically setting a formula. And then you can say, I take my y value times minus 1. So you make uh, the negative, the inverse of it. And let's see if we do this, save, and I compile, and you run it, and let's see what we get. Uh, uh, ooh, that's why does it looks a little bit funny. I am not sure. Oh, I said my y value. I should have said, of course, my x value. Now it always just was 0 because it was never set. So if we do that again, compile and run the experiment, and now uh, so you see actually if you do that, of course they always come on the same uh, in the same sort of like you see there on sort of like an equality line. Well, that just shows some things what you can do. Now this is just a simple example, but the whole idea is what I wanted you to learn is that you can set variables. Um, this is not necessarily a very useful experiment. I go back to random, for example, if I minus 250 to 250, that would probably be better for the size. But what you can of course set more random values. Um, well, you might say, well, okay, but why would I do this? Why? Well, randomization is one thing, but in practice, sometimes you just need to calculate something based on a formula. If you go to the experiment library, you often see this, and now that it has been explained to you, you probably understand this. But really have a look at on the overview because that's where you really learn how to use it, and you can create a whole screen full of sort of like randomly colored rectangles. You can do lots of fun things. And sometimes it's just, spend some time on playing around with it. You can also choose from a specific range of numbers where you want to choose just one, say, where, like something like if I have to say the numbers 1, 2, 3, 5, and 7, choose one of them randomly. Um, and have a look at so there are more complex things. You can work with arrays as well. I would say that is an advanced functionality, so I won't go into that in this video. I just wanted to show you, and also what I would like to show you, if you do something like that at the end of your trial, make sure that you save the value as well, because if it is set to a random value, there's no way of figuring out what that value was unless you have saved it into your data file. Right, I hope that those were some quick tips on using variables in PsyToolkit. If you like it, please like and subscribe to this channel.